Hi, everyone. I'm Tom George, owner and founder of SaraniaSat. I usually begin with my line saying, now for something completely different from Monty Python, but I think this crowd, I cannot claim that. It's kind of a very synergistic crowd. So I'd like to talk to you about our company and walk you through a couple of compelling use cases for our exciting remote sensing technology situation. Next slide, please. So we are all familiar with the concept of finding a needle in a haystack, but the reality is much more complex, and it is really about finding the particular needle within a stack of very similar looking needles. We have many different data sources such as satellites, drones, aircraft, and ground-based IoT sensors. And SaraniaSat's technology is especially good at analyzing complex information for saving lives, fueling businesses, and making sure that everyone has food on their table. So next slide, please. The first use case is defense and homeland security, and here's an example of SaraniaSat's advanced AI and machine learning algorithms successfully finding a single plane flying within a 100 square kilometer multispectral satellite image. For homeland security applications, this would translate to finding a terrorist before that terrorist causes any harm. Well, the reality is that all the data is there to find the terrorists, and our ability to extract actionable information and find the terrorist at the exact geolocation at the right time, as well as distinguishing the terrorist from the civilian standing next to him, is absolutely critical. But if you make a mistake, that is not only an innocent life lost, but also a terrorist loss, which are both terrible outcomes. So next slide, please. The next use case is drastically different, but of the same level of importance, and that is the world of precision or data-driven agriculture. And this is a concept that is only possible in today's reality with incredible amounts of data that can help us with decisions of not only maximizing the harvest yield, but also preventing widespread disease. We can identify crop-specific needs of, say, a corn crop versus a mango crop. In contrast, currently available multispectral data is incapable of distinguishing one crop type from another. With our technology, not only can we discern the different crop types, but we can track their health both in time and space. And we have been doing this successfully with Bayer Crop Science, a leading agricultural products company in the world. Of course, this has tremendous impact on the agricultural industry as a whole and the world in general. So next slide, please. This slide gives you a glimpse of the various kinds of data services that exist currently and have been described by the other speakers. Although satellite data enjoys a nice $7.5 billion market, this is a market that has nothing but room to grow if one compares it against the giant smartphone and internet data markets, which have literally exploded in recent years. The good news is that SaraniaSat is in the satellite data industry and positioned correctly in order to capitalize on this very rapidly growing market. Next slide, please. In terms of traction, we have successfully generated significant revenue both in the commercial and government sectors, and within the government, both from NASA and from the US Air Force. Next slide, please. We are not just a data company, we're also a hardware company with a partner developing the actual high-performance edge computing boards that are capable of running a wide variety of sophisticated commercial apps, such as the NV Geospatial Analysis product on which SaraniaSat has developed its AI ML algorithms. Next slide, please. What we do different is that we both acquire and analyze H-cube data, or high spatial and temporal resolution hyperspectral imagery. Now, this is a fancy term that means that we are acquiring more layers of information and processing it much more efficiently at a better price point than our competitors. Our competitors either are in the business of analyzing data from third-party sources or acquiring data, but we do both. Next slide, please. With regard to Ask, as Josh mentioned, we are interested in the TAC-5 program that matches investor dollars 1-to-1 for a maximum $1.7 million, and therefore requesting the full $1.7 million from the Air Force. That will double your investment for a total of $3.4 million for the company. Now, these funds will allow us to do some early stage research into developing a plan for our unique H-cube data acquisition and analytics satellite constellation, unlocking the potential trillion-dollar satellite data market. Next slide, please. We have a well laid out map of concrete milestones on our path to implementing our ultimate H-cube satellite data constellation. Next slide, please. And as you can see, we have been revenue positive within a year of our founding in 2016 with multiple major contracts and partner organizations. Next slide, please. And although as a company, we are currently very small, we have been fortunate to establish strategic partnerships with multiple major organizations on both our commercial and government contracts on our path to ultimately achieving our vision for a H-cube satellite constellation. So we invite you, therefore, to join us on this exciting journey to create a revolution in satellite data acquisition and exploitation. Thank you again for your time and attention.
All right. Thank you, Tom Kenny from Google. Question about your technology stack. So you have the data analytics portion. You developed the sensor with respect to constellation that you mentioned. Are you also looking at developing your own CubeSats to launch?
So
or are you partnering with other?
Yeah, we are partnering. So one of our big partners is L3Harris Corporation. They've been in the space business for over 5 decades, and they've also launched recently successful CubeSat missions. So this, I have been also at NASA. I was a former NASA manager at Jet Propulsion Laboratory. The problem, if you will, with new space, where most companies like Planet Labs and so on are focusing on 6U type of CubeSats, is that in order to acquire scientific grade data, you need a certain aperture size. And so for that, that then sets the size of your entire spacecraft. And so we are literally talking about a 100-kilogram satellite as opposed to a ton that is currently in, say, Landsat, right? So we have significantly reduced the size of the spacecraft and also thereby the cost of the implementation and the launch. But still, you need a certain minimum size in order to achieve the H-cube capability, which is 10-meter ground resolution, daily revisits, and hyperspectral across 400 bands. So that is the kind of data we will be needing for multiple business verticals that take advantage of satellite remote sensing data.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, can you comment on the use of fund? What is the milestone that you hope to achieve after this 3.4 million investment?
Right. Thank you. Even though, as you probably know, space is quite expensive, and traditionally, Landsat class data satellites have cost almost about $1 billion each to launch, right? And so what we are proposing to do is to bring about a constellation of satellites, and this would be 15 satellites, acquiring our H-cube data at 100 kilograms and this would be in the range of about $30 million a pop. So we are ultimately, when the entire constellation is implemented, that would be about $500 million for CapEx alone, right? So in order to orchestrate such a complex mission, one needs to come together in terms of both all the teaming arrangements that have to be in place, the consumers of the data, what kinds of data are going to be acquired, how the onboard processing is going to occur, because our big emphasis is on high performance edge computing, because the traditional paradigm in the Earth observation satellites has been to downlink all of the L0, level 0 data, or as acquired data from the instruments down to the ground and have it processed on the ground in terrestrial computers, because computing capability did not exist until now in space for high performance computing at the edge. So that's the revolution that we plan to get, so that we can then reduce the latency of getting the actionable information in the hands of the decision makers to within 24 hours of acquisition, which is unheard of in the space business.
Hey, so there's one question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry. There's one question from Han Ko in the chat. He says you have very impressive tech, and thank you for the presentation. They want to know what the development status is for the hardware board and functionality.
The hardware board is fully developed. It's currently going to be flown on a satellite later part of this month. So it's at what we would call in NASA terms TRL-9. So the board is ready. The basic technology elements, hardware and software, are also ready. So in terms of major risks, there aren't any major technological risk. It is more about the risk of putting together the entire system, making sure that the system works seamlessly and it's validated.
Who will you be selling the data to, or who will be your direct customers?
So right now we are a B2B company, and we work with large companies. For example, for the agricultural use case, we'll be working with Bayer Crop Science and using their channels for dissemination to their end customers, which would be growers and so on. As you know, agriculture is not just a simple business of a farmer growing crops. It's an entire ecosystem that consists of crop insurance companies, crop financial companies, and all of them need early warning data. And that is something that we plan to provide through the onboard computer.